question for Doug, actually, because it's just sort of one of the things I've learned recently about bandwidth issues is it's more than bandwidth as we're moving into this new era. And what I found out was that Bell Core scientists have been looking at radio networks because the wireless network operators were looking at their bandwidth demand, and it wasn't heavy, but the radio network was hosed. I mean, it was just occupied, no radio ports, right? So we don't understand this behavior. We're not using that much bandwidth. I think voice, text messages, how can that be chewing up all the bandwidth, right? So they do this study, and comes to find out that people now are starting to use applications in a different way. Like, let's say you get a VPN on a mobile client, on a PC, right? So the radio guys are telling me, and Doug, you may have a better understanding of why this is that the VPN gets nailed up, and so it's periodically pinging. I mean, that's just what it does. And so you leave it on 24/7, and it's just pinging away all day. There's no data being transmitted. Signaling overhead is out the kazoo, right? Facebook, the other thing they mentioned, says, well, what happens is you get these little widgets that are part of Facebook, and they're going out trying to find out what your friend is doing right now and pull it out from some different database, put it into Facebook. Right? Somebody just posted something, go get that information, pull it into Facebook. So again, you've got these little clients running around essentially pinging all these remote applications. You don't even know how many there are, and you can't predict how many people are going to use. And you just launch Facebook, and all this other stuff starts to happen. So if I'm running Facebook on my mobile, the mobile operator's got a problem. The radios are going berserk. Right? What was the other thing? Oh, my BlackBerry. Right? My BlackBerry's programmed, because I'm just sort of fanatical about emails, is pinging every minute. So about every 60 seconds, a ping goes out from my BlackBerry to the BlackBerry server saying, anything new? And it sends me back a message, no. Then a minute later, anything new? No. Or yeah, well, here's one message, right? So the bandwidth that's being chewed up might, in fact, not even be that high. Because we're talking in the voice text, really small load kinds of things, signaling overhead. But the radio network is different than the optical network. It's got another constraint on that spigot, right? Which is how many radios can I have in operation at any given point? And that's going to be yet another level of problems I normally don't have to deal with. The radio guys are saying, we've got a problem. All these applications are talking to other devices all the time, and as soon as you launch the application, they start talking. So does that make sense to you, Doug?
Yeah, I would say it makes complete sense, and you're right. It blindsides some people. I think the statistical multiplexing of the wireless part is it scares the heck out of an awful lot of people. Like you opened up with maybe you're going to have a gigabit a second to your handset, and although as I opened, never say never, then I think it'll be quite a while. Like we're talking about 4G, yeah, well maybe on the 11th Apple's going to have 3G on their phone. Well then they say, how fast is 3G really? And you start using 3G, it doesn't feel like the numbers that they're talking about.
It's not.
So, yeah, it's not. And even if you go way back to say Ethernet, oh, you get 10 megabits a second, which was really maybe 2 megabits a second in reality. So I'd say part of the problem ends up being that you've got guys who are concept guys, and they're great. They're awesome fellas. They're thinking out here about how great it would be. And so if you take, for example, the Microsoft Messenger cloud. So when I first started, it wasn't that big, and now it's big as a football field. And there's imagine that each user, and imagine there's 30, 40, 50 million users now, and each one, when they're on, they have a buddy list of 10 or 20 friends. Well, you end up having a problem trying to keep track of state of all these fellows who have their other fellows who are either on the net or not on the net, or there's timers going off that, gee, he didn't move his mouse for X number of minutes, so he must be away. We'll send another packet. So, say 10 or 20 million are on at any given time, and they're all constantly sending packets about the update, which is what you're talking about. It's not just the wireless networks that are taxed. I mean, the routers themselves are dealing with building a slow path initially to start up a session from a source to a desk pair, and then it has a fast path that it remembers. But if you have so much state going on, constantly it's scaling out this fast memory, and it has to keep, saying, oh, how do I do a setup for this next guy? Oh, well, sorry, I aged out. And that's expensive memory. The router vendors don't want to put extra memory in, and I don't blame them. But then, this state problem ends up being necessary because you say, well, is my cell phone going to be my phone, or is it my desktop, or is it going to be, some other thing, or ring them all, or ring the ones that are active. And we see why, but that's a hell of a challenge. And I'd say that the radio guys are scrambling like crazy. The WiMAX stuff's supposed to help, or you know, many of these types of things offer up, oh, I have the panacea, we'll solve your problem. Well, the fact is that, you know, I'm an old ham radio fella, and there will be new modulation schemes, new algorithms, new types of stuff, but in the end, it's always late. It's always late, and something happens. And right now, with the internet, the feedback loop ends up being, you know, because like Microsoft tried to do what we're doing again now, .NET back in 2001. Well, it didn't hit, it just didn't work. And you say, well, why didn't it work? Well, the internet wasn't ready for it. So what happens? People click, I'm going to try this out, I'm going to try this out. Oh, it doesn't work? Close the browser. That's the feedback loop. So you've got a natural set point of if it'll fit, well, then they'll use it. If you tell them about it and you train them up and they use it, they like it, they'll tell two friends and so on. But at some point, it meets a natural balance, and it's usually not nearly as much as the guy who initially was the concept guy thought it would be. Because we could get 1 billion people online. Well, that's all great, except they all say, man, this is moving too slow. Move on, do something else.
And by the way, since this is basically us in our living room or almost our bedroom here, just ask questions anytime you want to. I mean, there's no reason to hold back. It's an intimate gathering of people. You're all peers. You're all in the same business, and all of you have legitimate experiences.
Question. Yeah, this is a question for Dave, and maybe it's a little just a tangential subject. But you mentioned about copper being dead, and you mentioned tiers 3 and 4 were not markets for you. They were perceived profitable for reasons you explained. Does that mean you believe copper is dead for those markets as well?
Not as a quick erosion as you're going to see in the second and top tier markets. You just can't put the bandwidth down. I'd rather in the long run I look at those markets for, like I said, the 700 megahertz WiMAX adoptions will be perfect. And you know, I know the ILECs are going there with rural, that's where they're headed. They're going to sell off the copper right now, but they'll be back later with the WiMAX.
And of course, Dave would say that because he does fiber and he does it very well.
Oh no, but I mean, you know, he's back all the way.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's just like you're talking the wireless stuff here. I mean, what we see all the time is we'll get into these, you know, the purveyors of the future, and they talk about wireless meshes, you know, and then when you get into the caching, location registers, and all these other things you start talking about, all of a sudden, wire meshing falls flat on its face. Because all of a sudden we show them the economics of the fiber and what we can do today with it. You know, and part of what you're here for today is not just to find out what the purveyors of the future are telling you, but you know, you got to be making some money today in order to get to the future. Our industry is great for here's what's coming, here's what's coming. You know, and you know, we haven't had anybody yet over 100 gig phones. You know, I don't see that coming in the future. The other side of the growth thing too, which is a fact, 94% of business buildings in this country today still have only one carrier servicing them. And until you get competition in there, that bandwidth isn't going to be there, which drives the rest of it. And you know, it's the nature of the game, and that's why I always get asked, why aren't you doing this, why aren't you doing this? Shit, I got 95% more buildings. I do one at a time, and those margins, why would I screw it up with a VoIP margin of 30% when I'm racking 70, 75%? I just keep going, doing what I'm doing.
You just lit a route, as I recall, several routes between Las Vegas and Salt Lake and Salt Lake.
Carson City and, and Reno.
And based on your analysis, what's the customer demand there? So you're thinking casinos, and you'd be right about that.
Yeah, we have our networks in just about every casino there is in Las Vegas. Talk about reliability, folks. They don't go down. They can't afford to go down. Yeah, we're lighting those right now. About a gig. Gigs of traffic. But you got to keep in mind our customer base is also very small compared to, just given the size of us in the markets, what we do right now.
Boise too, right?
Boise.
In a couple of other sessions, we've talked about Cogent's first quarter announcement that they found that they slow. Comments?
Yeah, I would say if you could visualize the internet as these autonomous systems are really, it's not planar, but if you imagine these little bubbles, and these Cogent represents a bubble, Sprint's a bubble, MCI's a bubble, or Verizon and MCI